classic TV. This should not come as a shock to anybody, really, especially over the holidays when my folks are visiting. We watch a lot of Me TV and Antenna TV, and what kind of gets me is one of them, I think it's Me TV, does like this huge block of westerns, Bonanza, Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, and it's just so weird that westerns used to be like the predominant form of entertainment, the predominant genre for a huge stretch of time, and then just suddenly just kind of died out, and now westerns only kind of come along every so often, and they're either hyper stylized action pieces like the Magnificent Seven that was done a few years back, or they're these meditative think pieces. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of middle ground, because I guess that's the two extremes the Western genre kind of goes into. So this film, News of the World, fits into the latter category. This one wants to be a little bit more meditative think piece. This is, while watching this, I really kind of felt like I was watching a classic Western. This feels like something John Wayne might have starred in his later years, or even Jimmy Stewart might have starred in, which is fitting, seeing as, Tom Hanks is kind of the modern day equivalent of Jimmy Stewart when you really think about it. So what is this film about? So Tom Hanks plays a retired Confederate Army captain who, now that the war is over, his job is now he travels from town to town and reads the newspaper, hence the name of the film, The News of the World, which is, I'm glad they explained that right up front, because one of the first things I was going to say about this movie is, what the hell is this title? The title didn't make a lot of sense, but now it does. So he travels from town to town reading newspapers, which is an interesting thing, and I don't, again, not real up on history, so I don't know if this was a real thing that people did, but it would make sense. News was not as readily available, was nowhere near as readily available as it is now, or even as it was, 50 to 100 years ago even. And when you also consider that the literacy rate was pretty low back in the day, it would make sense to have somebody come in, read the paper, and then, skedaddle to the next town. So anyway, he travels from town to town reading the newspaper, and while traveling from one town to another, he comes across this small girl named Johanna, who had been kidnapped apparently by Indians, raised by them to whatever age she is now, 10, 11, somewhere in there. Then when the Union soldiers came in and massacred the Indians, trying to force them onto the reservations, they killed her now adopted family, so she's an orphan twice over, and she was being transported to her aunt and uncle, but that caravan got bushwhacked by somebody, they never say who, and Tom Hanks kind of comes across her, and long story short, kind of takes it upon himself to transport her however many miles and days and weeks and months, whatever, to her aunt and uncle's place. And of course, during the course of the journey, they face obstacles, they form a bond. You kind of get where this is coming from. So yeah, it's a fairly standard Western plot, really. The kind of lone wolf and cub thing that a lot of Westerns got into back in the day. This idea that you have to travel from one point to another and protect an innocent from a pretty harsh world, and especially at that point in time. I think that's one of the things I did like about this movie, is it kind of made me think about a point in history we don't really think about a lot, especially given kind of where we're at right now as a country, the very turbulent atmosphere that there is, especially politically. We always kind of say, okay, the Civil War happened, the Civil War ended, and then, we just kind of take for granted that, and then the country was whole again. And like, no, people were pretty bitter, and it took a long time to really, come back together, come on people down, smile on your brother type thing. So putting this kind of right there at a point when that area of the country, he's in Texas, and traveling kind of through Texas for the most part. That part of the country, very divided, very, very unstable in terms of law, especially with how spread apart a lot of the settlements and whatnot are. A lot of makeshift little settlements springing up with people kind of declaring themselves, in charge of the whole kit and caboodle. So it gives the road trip aspect of it a lot of obstacles that they have to overcome. That is something kind of, it's what's good about this movie, but it's also what kind of, you get a little tired of it after a bit, is that once they start out on the caravan, it really is, as my mother would have called it, little disaster on the prairie. And they really do just keep running. Like, every other minute they're running into somebody who wants to kill them, or some psychopath or something. They're chased by bounty hunters. They're kidnapped and taken to a weird town run by some self-imposed warlord. Their wagon breaks down and crashes. They're caught in a dust storm. It's just a never-ending, one disaster after another. Which, again, if they didn't do that, the movie would be frightfully dull, I would imagine. What kind of movie would it be if they went and everything went smoothly? I guess I just kind of would have liked a little bit of downtime, a little bit more downtime in between the destructive happenstance, just a little bit, not too much. The movie is fairly long, about 2 hours, and it doesn't necessarily drag. But it feels like a journey, It definitely doesn't feel like, oh, we started out and now we're here. It feels like it's taken a while and there's a lot going on. I will say this, that when the action scenes happen, they're pretty intense, and they're pretty exciting. One of the first ones is they're chased by these former Confederate soldiers, now turned kind of bounty hunters, who want the girl so they can take her and either get reward or sell her to a whorehouse or whatever. Again, it's very unclear what exactly they want her for, but they want her. So they're chasing them down, and Tom Hanks is, low on ammunition. Guns are a little bit more regulated, so he has to kind of smuggle one. He doesn't really have any buckshot, so they have to kind of improvise. It's a pretty clever action sequence of him and Johanna kind of figuring out how to get away and how to fight back given the limited resources. Almost a Wild West MacGyver kind of thing. And I think that kind of leads us to a little bit of discussion of Tom Hanks' character. It's an interesting character because, we've seen this kind of archetype in a Western before, the old soldier who doesn't want to be a soldier anymore. He's killed too much and, is pulled back into, we kind of think we know this character. But he's a very slight juxtaposition of that archetype. He is an old soldier, but unlike a lot of old soldiers, he doesn't seem overly haunted by the sins of the past. He talks a bit about it at the end, this was punishment for the things I'd done and seen, that kind of thing. But he doesn't seem like to be carrying that weight around with him too much. He is carrying weight, but it's different. And he doesn't seem to have any problem, like, getting back into defending himself. He's like, when it's time for him to do it, he does it. There's not a lot of the soul searching or, oh, I left violence behind. No. He's not Kurt Russell in Tombstone, wide up resisting the urge to get back into the game. It's like, no, they're coming after me and I'm going to defend myself, and I will do it lethally because that's kind of your only option. But we also see that he's a thinker when he's when he is kind of outgunned and he has no weapons and nothing else to fight back with, he uses kind of the atmosphere of the town, and he uses the situation that he has, and he uses what he's good at, the conveying of news and the telling of stories, to get him out of it. It's clever how, for each situation, we see how he kind of works his way through it, either be it with violence or intelligence or a mixture of both. So it's an interesting character. I also have to give big ups to the young lady, and I don't know her name, who is playing Johanna, who is... it's always a hard thing, I think, when a young actor has to carry the scenes primarily. It's them and a more experienced actor. Because lesser actors, someone who's not as good as Tom Hanks, will really show up how inexperienced the kid actor is. And show all the weaknesses. But someone like Tom Hanks, who is very personable and is kind of that everyman, has a more natural connection. Kind of like John Candy. John Candy was always good with younger actors. He always knew how to talk to them and to get a good performance with them. And I think Tom Hanks here is doing the same thing, just showing off how good he is with her. And it's especially a challenge because the character of Johanna, because she was raised by Native Americans for the majority of life, she only speaks, I forget which tribe they say she's speaking, but she doesn't speak English, and so they have to form their relationship through a little bit of pantomime and a little bit of situational awareness and whatnot. So it's a much harder thing than just having dialogue back and forth with another character. You have to kind of form that relationship on a more, I don't want to say primal, but a more base level. And she pulls that off pretty well. Both of them do. It should be no surprise that Tom Hanks is fantastic because he's Tom Hanks. But she does a very nice job, and that's not an easy role to do, especially speaking another language, which I doubt she was fluent in beforehand, but she definitely sounds fluent. So good on the young lady for that. I also think it's interesting how this film is shot. A lot of Westerns like to show off the grandness and the wide open space. That's kind of why Westerns were so popular, that feeling of freedom. You could live in town, but then you take your horse and you gallop out into the great unknown. You just ride around and do whatever you want. It's that fantasy of having unbridled freedom. One of the things I love to do in Red Dead Redemption is just ride around. It's what a lot of people like to do, is just get on the horse and ride. So a lot of Westerns tend to shoot the outdoors and the nature that they're surrounded by with, very, very bright shots, real colorful, really showing off the landscape. Made you go, ooh, and isn't that beautiful? And this film doesn't do that. The color palette is a lot more grainy, so that you're still getting these wide shots, but it's not showing off kind of the vast beauty of the American frontier. A lot of it is dusty. They still keep the camera fairly narrow on them on the road, because there's always that feeling that veering off the road is going to lead to danger, and it's always trying to give you that impression that this is not a safe time and this is not a safe place. This guy traveling with this little girl are never safe. There's always somebody out there looking to hurt you. There's always somebody out there looking to take advantage of you. So, like I say, as opposed to the bright, beautiful way that like John Ford would shoot the Wild West, this one is coming at it from a little bit more of a cautious place. And yet, the film is surprisingly optimistic. It is not a film about the ugliness of humanity and how that's going to win out. It is a film about how the better aspects of humanity are going to come to the surface. If only we could say that was true. And anyway, my only real complaint about this film is, sadly, the acting of Tom Hanks. Now, Tom Hanks is brilliant. He's one of our best living actors. There's no question about that. And he's good in this. But what I have a problem with is his acting and his line delivery in this film is, I need to come up with a term for this, because I see it a lot in some of these movies. When a film is really trying to be taken seriously, when a film is really convinced of its own importance, the actors tend to take on this monotone, because they don't want to act too much. They don't want everything to be up, because that would belie the seriousness. So everything they do is in this kind of monotone. What are we doing here, officers? Well, little girl, when we ride straight on. We don't look at the big world. My name is the captain. It's very, very monotone. And again, you can justify this with he's saving his voice, because he does kind of project out when he's doing the newspaper readings, and so that's his stage persona, and this is his real persona, quieter man, and I get that. But what that does when we're left with that for the majority of the film is, I don't know, it's dull to listen to. It becomes a flat line. I tell this to my actors all the time. You've got to change inflection. You've got to change emotion. You've got to vary things up in a logical way, because if you're just kind of at one pitch the whole time, be that yelling the whole time, being quiet the whole time, being happy the whole time, whatever, if that's all you're doing, it eventually just becomes noise. And I feel like him doing that monotone, while justifiable for the character, I understand why he's doing it. It just doesn't work from an audience perspective, because it's just very dull. You're just like, change it up. You should not be fooled by the advertisements for this film. This film is trying to advertise it as an action picture, as a nonstop thrill ride. I've got to get her home, kind of thing. And that is not what this is. This is a much smaller, much more personal, much more contemplative film. It has its action beats in it, and the action beats in it are very good. But that's not what the film is. It is the connection between Tom Hanks and Johanna, and the journey that they're on, which is dangerous, but it's not a thrill ride, a minute action picture. So if that's what you're going kind of looking for, you're going to end up disappointed, because it's not that at all. It's still good. It's still very good with what it is. I wish I could say more about the other actors, but they're in and out. You could see this movie if 10 years from now, or even 5 these days, if HBO or Netflix or somebody said, we're going to take the book that this was based on and make it a series, I would not be surprised, because it does have more of that Incredible Hulk, The Fugitive kind of feel to it. We travel to a place, we have an adventure in the place, and then we move on, and then we go to a next place, we meet new quirky characters, we deal with them for a little bit, and then we move on. I could see this being an HBO series. Of course, they'd have to add a lot more violence and swearing, or something like that, because it has other characters, and all the other actors are very good, but none of them really stand out, because they're only there for like a short period of time, and then they move on. Again, not a bad thing. That's just the way the story is structured. Here's something interesting, and this is neither an up or a down. It's kind of interesting, a directorial choice. the Native Americans in this movie, they never actually appear in any really clear shot. They're spoken of, and we know that Johanna was, they say kidnapped by them when she was young, and they have a presence, but it's an off in the distance, always obscured view presence. The first time we see them, Johanna tries to run away because she's trying to get back to her tribe, and she sees a tribe of them across a river on a stormy night as they're moving, and she's screaming, "Take me with you, take me with you." And you see them kind of silhouetted as the lightning strikes, but you never actually see them. The second time you see them is in a dust storm, so you see their figures, and you know who it is, but even when they do close-ups, they're still obscured by the sand. So it's an interesting visual choice, and I am not sure why that is. And it's one of those directorial choices that makes me go, I wonder why they made that. Was it because they're kind of the hazy past that Johanna has? Is it because they are a threat, but they are not the threat that classic Westerns have made them out to be? They're not these wild savages. So basically our view of them is hazy. Is that what they're saying? I don't know. It's just one of those things I noticed, and it's an interesting thing. I have no solid reason for why they would do that, but it's an interesting directorial choice. On the whole, not a whole lot to get into with this one. It's a good movie. It's a quiet movie. It's a smaller movie than what's been advertised, but it's still a good Western, and like I say, a classic Western. So, final grade for the News of the World. I am going a B+ on this one, and what gets it that B+ is the ending. I don't want to spoil anything, but for all of the trials and tribulations, for the fairly negative view of the world that we are presented with, even amongst the growing relationship between Tom Hanks and Johanna, the ending is very rewarding and very uplifting, and it's a good ending. I liked this movie a lot for the ending. The journey that you go on is good, but when it finally gets where it's going, it's very satisfactory, and I appreciated that. So this is one that I recommend giving a look at, but again, don't be expecting a big action-packed shoot 'em up. Be expecting a quieter character piece, and if you do that, I think you'll enjoy this one, especially if you have any love of old Westerns yourself. All right, so that is it. 2021 continues at a pace. We're still fighting through. But we're fighting through together. So thank you for joining me. Of course, we'll be coming back with some Forgotten Gems. We still have the series I want to do, and my new podcast with my beautiful girlfriend, Date Night. We just dropped the first 2 episodes. So if you are looking for that, or you're interested in that, please give us a check. So those are my plugs. Thanks for joining me, and as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.